When you hear the word villain, what ideas does it conjure into your head? A creature that lives purely for chaos? A sympathetic loner? Someone willing to do whatever it takes for a perfect future? For me, the idea of a villain only brings about one word: dastardly.
Exactly as I planned it. Right, Muttley?
February 12th, 1908. The 1908 New York to Paris race commences in Times Square, New York, with 6 racers prepared to drive across the North American continent, board a boat in Alaska, take a 150-mile ship journey to Beijing, and drive across the entirety of Asia and Europe to reach Paris, France. The American car, a Thomas Flyer driven by George Schuster, would come out victorious, and only 3 cars would finish, which is rather impressive considering cars still looked like this, and there was almost no infrastructure. The winning car is still on display at the National Automobile Museum in Reno, Nevada, but the car itself isn't as important as the legacy it would inspire. July 1st, 1965. The Great Race, directed by Blake Edwards, is released in theaters. The film stars Tony Curtis as the Great Leslie, the 1960s interpretation of The Perfect Man, Natalie Wood as Maggie Dubois, a suffragette who didn't take Leslie's bullshit, and, most importantly, Jack Lemmon as Professor Fate.
Fate the Magnificent!
Shooting for the film began June 15th, 1964, and stretched all the way to November of 1964. This was an issue because part of Natalie Wood's agreement to act in the film was that filming would be short. Shooting lasted so long because the film went over budget. A lot over budget. The film was initially approved with a $6 million budget by United Artists, only to be picked up by Warner Brothers when United Artists saw the budget getting out of hand. The film would become the most expensive comedy that had ever been released by that point, in part due to the elaborate set pieces, visual gags, effects, and the pie fight. Warner Brothers had several custom vehicles built, including 4 Leslie Specials and 5 Hannibal Twin 8s. The Hannibal Twin 8s each cost roughly $150,000 to build, or roughly $1.2 million when adjusted for inflation. The film itself opens up with the Great Leslie and Professor Fate performing a variety of daredevil tricks. With each of Leslie's tricks, Professor Fate attempts to sabotage with the help of his sidekick Max, only for his wacky plans to backfire almost immediately. From there, the film follows a very similar route to the real-world 1908 New York to Paris race, with a few differences.
Rise and shoot!
I could dive into a full recap, but you should really watch the film for yourself. It's filled with hilarious gags and comedy that still holds up well today, even if certain aspects would land Leslie on the sex offenders registry by modern standards. All you need to know is that throughout the race, Professor Fate continues to constantly attempt subterfuge, blowing up gas stations, and even overthrowing a sovereign nation with the sole purpose of delaying the Great Leslie.
Don't you try any double crosses, my friend. Keep our deal. He stays in the pokey until I'm safely in Paris. No double crosses. When it comes to double crosses, you are looking at the king.
He doesn't do it alone, as he has the help of his sidekick Max, to whom he is physically abusive on numerous occasions. The defunct Daredevil is duplicitous, devilish, devious, and some may even say dangerous. The film will be nominated for 5 Academy Awards, and win for 1, Best Sound Effects. But to truly see the legacy it left behind, we'll have to jump back a few years. William Joseph Hanna and Joseph Roland Barbera would first meet in working in the animation division of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in 1937. The duo would solidify their partnership and create their first big hit, a short cartoon about 2 mortal rivals, a gray cat and a brown mouse, named Tom and Jerry. Over the coming decades, the duo would win several Academy Awards for the studio with their work on Tom and Jerry and a variety of other projects, including animating the title sequence for I Love Lucy. That is, until 1957, when MGM closed its animation department due to the belief that their backlog could be redistributed without need for new additions. With the studio declining their pitch for a new cartoon, Hanna and Barbera were convinced by fellow industry professionals to create HB Enterprises, with Hanna's name coming first after winning a coin flip. HB Enterprises was met with almost immediate success. The pitch that had been declined by MGM became the Rough and Ready Show and would run for 156 episodes. Their next show, The Huckleberry Hound Show, was the first animated series to ever win an Emmy Award. The company soon expanded even further, renaming itself to Hanna-Barbera Productions in 1959. Although not everything the studio produced was a hit, they developed far more successes than losses. Then, on September 14th, 1968, Hanna-Barbera Productions would debut one of its most successful characters yet.
Daredevil group of daffy drivers to ever whirl their wheels in the Wacky Races.
The premise of Wacky Races is simple. What if we take an automobile race and make it wacky? Like the Great Race, but Professor Fate isn't the only one with gadgets and gizmos. The show is incredibly straightforward as a result. Each episode follows a race from point A to point B with cars and characters interacting in wacky ways, and the top 3 finishers of each race being announced by the announcer. The show would feature 11 unique cars, numbered 00 through 10, all competing to be the world's wackiest racer. Car number 1, the Bouldermobile, was driven by the Slag Brothers, a pair of cavemen who would talk in gibberish. And Car 2, the Creepy Coupe, was the gruesome twosome. By all known laws of comedy, I'm willing to bet you can figure out which one was named Tiny. Car 3 belonged to Professor Pat Pending and was called the Converticar. I think the name speaks for itself. Car 4, which barely qualifies as a car, the Crimson Hay Baler, is driven by the Red Max. It can fly for whatever amount of time is most convenient. Car 5 is driven by Wacky Race's second most popular character, Penelope Pitstop, and is called the Compact Pussycat. It has everything the 1960s interpreted a woman as needing. Car 6 is a tank driven by Sergeant Blast and Private Meekly. The tank is called the Army Surplus Special, so I can only assume its occupants are operating under stolen valor. The Anthill Mob, who get mistaken for the 7 dwarves from Snow White multiple times in what I can only assume is a hilarious reference in the 1960s, drive car number 7, the Bulletproof Bomb. Lazy Luke and his companion Blubber Bear drive the Arkansas Chugabug as the 8th car. At number 9 in the Turbo Terrific, Peter Perfect is the first character that you'd argue is actually inspired by the Great Race, having a strong resemblance to the Great Leslie. Lastly, at number 10, Rufus Roughcut and Sawtooth the Beaver drive the death trap that is the Buzzwagon. Seriously, who in their right mind replaces their wheels with buzzsaws?
But wait a minute, didn't you say there were 11 cars?
Right you are, Robot Dr. Phil. There's no pulling a fast one over on you. In car number 00, we have the men of the hour, Dick Dastardly and his sidekick Muttley, driving their vehicle, the Mean Machine. Dick Dastardly is heavily inspired by Jack Lemmon's performance as Professor Fate. Their mannerisms, their scheming nature, even their mustaches. Don't believe me? Here's Jack Lemmon's title card in the opening credits of The Great Race. Dastardly was voiced by Paul Winchell, who you may know as the original voice of Tigger from Winnie the Pooh and the inventor of the artificial heart. Wacky Races, unlike its inspirations, doesn't leave the North American continent. Many episodes have titles based on states and landmarks that can be found within the United States. Dastardly spends the series repeatedly asserting his superiority as a racer by beating every other racer to landmarks along the route so thoroughly that he has time to set up elaborate traps and schemes, including blowing up several structures with dynamite, messing with any and every form of road signage possible, and pretty much every cartoon physics gimmick you can think of. Dick Dastardly's schemes always backfire on him. Sometimes the karma immediately hits, but other times it'll take a full episode for Dastardly to finally get his comeuppance. His schemes also almost always prevent him from actually completing the race, and he's never placed in the top 3. The only time he did finish a race in first place, he was disqualified for extending the front of his car out. To say that Dick Dastardly was the standout character from Wacky Races would be an understatement. The narrative of almost every episode surrounded his schemes, and even the opening places an emphasis on Dick Dastardly above all the other racers. Dick's popularity would ultimately prevail, and he would get his own spin-off. One of the 2 direct spin-offs from Wacky Races, Dastardly and Muttley and Their Flying Machines, follows Dick Dastardly and Muttley as they pilot World War I style planes and attempt to catch the messenger pigeon, Yankee Doodle Pigeon.
I'm the boss around here, and I'll go first.
The show is also known as Catch the Pigeon, thanks to its catchy theme song.
Stop the pigeon, stop the pigeon, stop the pigeon, stop the pigeon.
Dastardly and Muttley would each get makeovers for the show, changing their outfits to fit in the airborne setting. The Mean Machine's drivers are also joined by 2 new characters, Zilly and Clunk, as well as the never-seen but often heard General, who would give the Vulture Squadron orders over the phone. Much like Wacky Races, Catch the Pigeon followed a formula for each episode. The Vulture Squadron would spend 1 or 2 segments creating various flying machines, some of which barely qualified as planes, and creating various schemes to catch the pigeon. Like Wacky Races, the schemes would fail and backfire with disastrous consequences, usually a hard fall for Dick Dastardly. Each episode of Catch the Pigeon would also feature 2 other segments, Wingdings and Magnificent Muttley. Wingdings was a series of short clips consisting of animated puns, jokes, and goofs, while Magnificent Muttley would follow the daydreams of Muttley, featuring Dick Dastardly and a variety of villain rules, ranging from a simple safecracker to the Emperor of Space. Dastardly and Muttley and Their Flying Machines would run for 17 episodes, the final episode airing January 3rd, 1970. After the end of the series, Dastardly and Muttley Muttley would be lost to time. That is until 1985, with the premiere of Yogi's Treasure Hunt. Yogi's Treasure Hunt featured an ensemble cast of some of Hanna-Barbera's most popular characters, including the cast of Yogi Bear, Snagglepuss, Quick Draw McGraw, Snooper and Blabber, Augie Doggy and Doggy Daddy, and Huckleberry Hound, all taking orders from Top Cat as he guides them to mystical treasures. The Hanna-Barbera crew is chased time and time again by the devious Dick Dastardly and Muttley. The rest of Vulture Squadron is nowhere to be seen. The show follows the formula of Yogi's crew being given a mission from Top Cat with perilous stakes. Dick Dastardly will overhear Top Cat's orders, and then the two groups will race to solve a riddle to find the treasure. Much like in his previous appearances, Dastardly and Muttley continually scheme and cause trouble that always backfires on the duo. Following Yogi's Treasure Hunt, the Dastardly duo's next appearance wouldn't be a cartoon, but instead, a theme park ride. The Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera was an opening day attraction at the Universal Studios theme park in Florida. The ride was a simulator, in which guests were loaded into stationary cars following a pre-ride film featuring Dick Dastardly and Muttley kidnapping Elroy Jetson from Hanna-Barbera Studios to hold ransom for a spot in a new project. Once loaded into the cars, the simulator would raise, lower, tilt, and shake the ride vehicle in sync with the movements of the ride film, in which Yogi Bear launched the theme park guests in a rocket to chase Dick Dastardly through iconic Hanna-Barbera scenery, such as the town of Bedrock from the Flintstones, a haunted mansion from Scooby-Doo, and Orbit City from the Jetsons. The ride ends with the Jetsons rescuing Elroy and Dick Dastardly and Muttley being ferried off to prison. Dick Dastardly would go on to feature in many of Hanna-Barbera's properties as a recurring and guest villain until 2001, when, following the death of William Hanna, Hanna-Barbera was absorbed into Warner Bros. And the studio was closed. Hanna-Barbera's once great library of characters wouldn't go unused, but the once great Dick Dastardly was seldom seen beyond cameos and background appearances. This isn't the end of the story, however. In 2016, DC Comics launched its Hanna-Barbera Beyond initiative, publishing grittier takes on classic Hanna-Barbera properties. Among these series was not just one, but two comic runs featuring Dick Dastardly. The first was Wacky Raceland, a reimagining of the Wacky Races cartoon set in a post-apocalyptic world, where the racers compete under the false promise of the winner being brought to a utopia. The world of Wacky Racelands was devastated by floods and cannibals and mutants and monsters and nanites that could tear through human flesh like me eating a bowl of jello. And worst of all, bears! Dick Dastardly is a major player in the 6-issue run, albeit not in the same way as his cartoon counterpart. Richard Dastardly cheats and does anything to win at all costs, with the hope of resurrecting his wife and son, who died when he didn't let them into a safe room during an attack of nanomachines. His sidekick Muttley is a cybernetically enhanced dog that was experimented on in the mysterious Butcher Room that serves as a connecting thread for many of the racers. Dick is a bastard who nearly let his fellow racers die so he can take a victory, but he isn't as devious as his past incarnations. His schemes don't involve cartoon physics and changing road signs. They involve subjecting his fellow racers to near-death experiences, only to go out drinking with them after the race is over. Wacky Racelands is a cruel, unforgiving reimagination of the Wacky Races, but it wasn't the only comic from the Hanna-Barbera Beyond initiative to focus on Dastardly and Muttley. Written by Garth Ennis of The Boys fame, Dastardly and Muttley focuses on the mental decline of Richard Dick Atcherley and his sidekick Dudley Mutt Mueller after their exposure to a dangerous element called unstablium on an Air Force recon mission. The comic initially takes place in a somewhat grounded setting before a military drone named Warpig 1 flies around the globe spreading cartoon physics and destabilizing people's mental well-being through the aforementioned unstablium. Dick and Mutt are among the first to be exposed to the unstablium, and although it initially seems Dick is unaffected, Mutt is fused with a dog he smuggled aboard their fighter jet. From there, the series escalates in its wackiness as Dick slowly loses his mind and more people are exposed to unstablium. Victims of unstablium include the President of the United States, who kills a senator with a cartoon mallet and dies being cut into pieces by a harp, the Vice President of the United States, who becomes a cartoon fox after being sworn in as POTUS, and two Air Force buddies of Dick and Mutt, who slowly begin to mutate. The final issue ends with Dick, now completely mentally broken and referring to his friends by names that aren't theirs, crashing a fighter jet into the Warpig 1 drone. The last words Dick lets out before saving the world at the cost of him, Muttley, Zilly, and Clunk are "Catch the Pig 1." That's right, the guy who wrote The Boys wrote a 6-issue prequel series to Dastardly and Muttley and their flying machines that retroactively makes the series sad as shit. But that wouldn't be the last appearance of Dick Dastardly. In the 2017 Wacky Races reboot, Dick Dastardly III reveals that there have actually been 3 Dick Dastardlys. The first was the flying ace, Dick Dastardly I, the Dick Dastardly from Catch the Pigeon, and presumably every show that uses his pilot's design. The second Dick Dastardly was the original from the Wacky Races, and the third takes up the mantle of his father and grandfather, the latter of whom actually makes an appearance in the show, and continues their legacy of villainy. And that's it. That's every Dick Dastardly appearance. Definitely not a single one I am forgetting about. Okay, let's talk about Scoob. Dick Dastardly is the main villain in the 2020 animated movie Scoob. His character design in Scoob gets an overhaul, much like all the other classic characters that make appearances. The movie abandons his higher-pitched voice in favor of having Jason Isaacs' voice. The Mean Machine is no longer just a car, instead it's a flying pollution machine. And instead of a devious duo, Dick is flanked by an army of mechanical minions on his quest to kidnap Scooby-Doo to save Muttley from eternal damnation in hell. This Dick Dastardly abandons almost all of the character's roots. Sure, he's the bad guy and that's the role he needs to fill, but it misses out on why Dick Dastardly is such a great villain to begin with. Dick Dastardly is a character that is defined by failure and persistence. His schemes backfire on him in comical ways. He seeks treasure out of greed and never in a fair way. He doesn't have the technical know-how to create a portal to hell. He has gadgets that let him swoop in at the last moment after someone else has done the heavy lifting. Dick Dastardly is the greatest villain in history because he's a reflection of humanity's worst traits. He's a no-good, greedy narcissist that lies, cheats, and steals his way to what little success he can find. He relies on the hard work of others while taking all of the credit for himself. We all know a Dick in our lives, which makes it all the more satisfying to see him fail.